Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode. We're going to be working on Unit 1 still, lessons 3 and 4. Our topic of the day is visitors to Egypt. So get ready, get your notebooks out and your pens. We're going to be doing a little bit of a drawing today, so be prepared. Let's get started. Our learning objective of the day is we're going to listen to a conversation with a tourist. We're going to ask for and give recommendations. We're going to ask and answer a quiz about helping tourists. We're going to discuss ways to help tourists. We're going to design a tourist brochure for Egypt. Now let's look at the first slide. Exercise 1. We're going to ask and answer. Now, when tourists visit your village or city, what should they see or do? Use the ideas in the idea map to make suggestions. So you can draw those same idea maps in your notebooks, and you can try to create your own sentences on how you can help give advice to those tourists or give suggestions on what they should do or see. Now let's try and practice together. You should go shopping, or you should go for a walk. You should go on a tour. You should go to a concert. You should go into the country. Or we can advise them to visit, so we might say, you should visit ancient sites, you should visit a garden, you should visit historical buildings, you should visit the old town, or you should visit a bazaar. So try to create your own mind maps and fill in the sentences using those mind maps. Now we're going to be listening to an audio of Tariq and his father talking to two tourists. Do the tourists want to see or do the same things that you suggested in exercise 1? Let's listen and find out.
Look, Father, those tourists are lost. Yes, we should help them. Excuse me, do you need any help? Oh, thank you. We're looking for the Tourist Information Center. It isn't far from here, but it is closed today. Can we help you? Thank you. It's our first trip to Egypt, you see. There's so much to see and do here. We don't know what to do first. We're interested in all the ancient sites and famous places. Where do you suggest we start? I suggest that you visit the museum. It's a good place to learn all about the things you'll see at the ancient site. That's a good idea. When we're at an ancient site, do you recommend a tour guide? Yes, that's a very good idea. The guides can tell you a lot of interesting things about a place. I also recommend you buy a guidebook. You can buy one at the Tourist Information Center tomorrow when it opens. Okay, we also want to go shopping. What is the best place to buy souvenirs? Do you recommend going to the bazaar? Yes, you should go to the bazaar in the old part of the city. There are lots of crafts to buy there. That sounds good. Oh, one more thing. Is there a good place to eat near the museum? It's nearly lunchtime and we're really hungry. The best place to try traditional Egyptian food is the cafe opposite the museum. Have a good day. You too, thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to go to the questions in exercise 3. What does Tariq's father think that the tourists should visit first? If you don't remember, you can always listen to the track one more time. And the answer is the museum. So Tariq's father believes that the tourist should visit the museum first. Let's go to question 2. Why do Tariq and his father recommend a tour with a guide? Why do you think they recommend a tour with a guide? What does a tour guide do? Because the guides can tell you a lot of interesting things about a place. So the tour guides always have information about the country and about the history and the ancient places that we are visiting as tourists. Let's move on to question 3. When and where can the tourists buy a guidebook? Where and when can the tourists buy a guidebook? They can, of course, Get it from the Tourist Information Center when it opens tomorrow. Question 4. What kind of food do Tariq and his father recommend to the tourists who are hungry? They recommend the traditional Egyptian food. Okay. Let's move on to exercise 4. Now it's your turn to take turns to be a visitor to your area and to ask for and give recommendations or advice. If we look at the speech bubble on the right-hand side, it says, do you recommend going to the park? What do you think? Do you recommend to tell tourists to go to the park? Now, when we're asking for recommendations, we can say, where do you suggest we start? Or we can say, do you recommend a tour with a guide going to the bazaar? What's the best place to buy souvenirs? Is there a good place to eat near the museum? Now, if we're giving recommendations, we would say, I recommend a tour, or you buy a guidebook. Or I might give recommendations by saying, I suggest that we start with, and then suggest the location, such as a museum or going to the beach. The next example of giving recommendations is the best place to try traditional Egyptian food is, and you can suggest a restaurant that you like. Think of all the restaurants that offer traditional Egyptian food. You can buy a guidebook at the Tourist Information Center. Now, I'd like you guys to do an internet search and find out what Hurghada used to be before it became popular with tourists. So find out about the history of Hurghada before it was actually Hurghada. Now we're going to jump to lesson 4, same topic. Now we're going to be doing a small quiz to learn more about ourselves. Some tourists are trying to pay for something in a bazaar, but they can't understand Egyptian money. What should you do? Is it A, you should help the tourist to count the right money? Or is it B, you shouldn't do anything because you will make the tourist feel bad if you help? Choose one answer and write it down in your notebook. You choose A or B. Let's go on to question 2 in the quiz. Some tourists are lost. They're trying to find the museum. What should you do? Is it A, you should give them directions and draw them a map? Or is it B, you should walk away because someone else will come and help them? Choose one answer and write it down in your notebook. We're going to move to question 3. A tourist has lost his bag with his camera and passport in it. What do you say? Don't worry, I'll take you to the police station, or you should be more careful. Choose one answer and write it in your notebooks. Number 4. Some tourists are trying to buy a train ticket. The assistant at this station does not speak English, and the tourists can't speak Arabic. What do you do? Ask them what they need and tell the assistant in Arabic, or you don't do anything. If they needed help, they would ask. Choose one answer and write it down in your notebooks. Now, if you have answered B for all the questions in the previous slide, then you probably don't like to give advice. Is this true? Do you really not like giving advice? I suggest you reconsider your ideas about that. Okay, we're going to move on to question 2. From which countries do many tourists come to Egypt? I want you to think about whenever you see tourists in the street or at any ancient site, which countries do you find the most? Are they Chinese or British or maybe American or maybe from Pakistan? Think about all the countries that tourists come from all around the world. Now let's move on to question 3. Why is it important to help tourists? Why do you think it's important to help tourists? Think about helping. When you help others, how do you feel? And how do they feel? If you feel that you make a difference, then maybe you should help others. Can you think of other ways to help the tourists? I'm sure there are many ways to help tourists. Now, it depends on their situation and what they need help with, right? So let's move on to encouraging tourists to come to Egypt. We'd like to encourage tourists to come to Egypt so that it affects everything. When tourists come to Egypt, it affects our economy, it affects everything around us is changing. Now, first, think of 3 or 4 reasons to make Egypt a good place to visit. And then find pictures that you can put in the brochure and then write the brochure. Once you're done with creating a brochure similar to the one on the right-hand side in the picture, I want you to ask a family member, such as your mom, your dad, your cousin, your uncle, to think of 3 reasons that make Egypt a good place to visit and compare your answers to theirs. Now that's a wrap. We have listened to new vocabulary words, listened to a conversation with a tourist, asked for and gave recommendations, asked and answered a quiz about helping tourists, discussed ways to help tourists, and designed a tourist brochure. Thank you guys. Have a great day. This is Ms. Sara Bassioni. I was with you today.